human society is an eternally dynamic structure. Its various aspects are constantly under change. History is a record of these changing processes. This is why, in social sciences, the historical study of social processes is so revealing and important. In the historical study of a social structure, the causal relation between its various aspects becomes known. The current structure, culture, folkways, and social mores and organization of any social groups are resultants of its back forces, that is, its history and evolution. The historical knowledge about these processes enables us to anticipate their future structure. No social change takes place in the void. It is a result of the past forces and will give rise to future forces. Accordingly, in order to understand efficiently any social group or institution, it has to be studied in its historical perspective. In this way, a social scientist studies the past to gain a better understanding of the present state of affairs in modern times. A number of social scientists have made extensive historical studies on various social institutions. An eminent example of this type of study is Westermarck's History of Marriage, in which the gradual evolution of the institution of marriage has been studied historically. The method of historical study in social sciences has had a great impetus from Darwin's studies of biological evolution. Besides various methods such as comparative method, descriptive method, scientific method, survey and field research method, conceptual method, etc. have been applied to social science research. However, here we shall confine our discussions only to historical research. History is a meaningful record of man's achievement. It is not merely a list of characteristics of chronological events, but an integrated account of the relationship between persons, events, times, and places. It is a branch of learning that studies the record of past events. It is an inquiry into the past to establish what has actually happened. All studies of extent, that is, already collected data, are historical to some degree because they are based on evidence from and about the past. Historical research, however, is not merely defined as studying anything from the past. It also implies certain methods and points of view that historians bring to study to material from the past. In social sciences, historical method found its expression and application as early as in the middle of the 19th century through the writings of the German historical school. The social scientists who have employed this method seem clearly to have been influenced by Hegel's philosophy of history and Darwin's theory of biological evolution. Past knowledge is considered to be a prerequisite for present knowledge. This is the main argument for the adaptation of historical method in present-day social research. Nothing happens in social vacuum. Insofar as anything has been anticipated, history and natural development, past is casually related to the present. Although there is intertemporal change of situations, there are still certain orders and regularity in social matrix. These regularities are regarded as process, series, sequence, pattern periodicities, and cycles. It is said that history repeats itself. The historian is influenced by some theory implicitly or explicitly operating in his interpretation. Historians, philosophers, socio-psychiatrists, literary men, as well as social scientists have used the historical approach as an aid in visualizing society as a dynamic organism and its structures and functions as steadily growing and undergoing change and transformation. Social scientists are interested in social change. In order to study the changes in time, contemporary researchers are interested in historical research. They acknowledge an indirect influence of the past on human experience. According to Pauline V. Young, historical method is the induction of principles through research into the past and the social forces which have shaped the present. In other words, it is a study of the past records and other information with a view to reconstructing the origin and development of an institution or movement or a system and discovering the trends in the past. In the words of Fred N. Kerlinger, historical research is the application of scientific method of inquiry to historical problems. It demands standards of careful methodology and a spirit comparable to those which characterize other types of research. Hence, historical research is the critical investigation of events, developments, and experiences of the past, the careful weighing of the evidence of the validity of sources of information, of weighed evidence. It involves identification and limitations of the problem, formulation of the hypothesis, collection, organization, verification, validation, and analysis of data, testing the hypothesis, and the writing of the historical account. All of these steps lead to a new understanding of the past and its relevance to the present and future. Whitney's views historical research deals with the past experience. Its aim is to apply the method of reflective thinking of social problems still unsolved by means of discovery of past trends of event, fact, and attitude. It traces lines of development in human thought and action in order to reach some basis for social activity. Based on the above definitions, we can derive the features of historical research as follows. It is descriptive in nature. It is a study of past records and other information, discovers the trends in the past, depend upon interface and logical analysis of recorded data, depend upon indirect evidences rather than direct observations. It is an induction of principles through research into the past and social forces which have shaped the present. Objectives of historical research. The historical method is primarily concerned with the origin and development of social institutions and cultural forms, and the progress of their evolution is charted. It studies a particular institution in the background of entire human history. In order to discover some basis for social activity, the method becomes specific in character. The main objective of this method is to apply mind in this matter of various social problems by discovering the past trend regarding facts, events, and attitudes, and by demarcating the lines of development of thought and action. The objective of historical method is to draw explanations and generalizations from the past trends in order to understand the present and to anticipate the future. It enables us to grasp our relationship with the past, and the present influences the future. It helps us in visualizing the society as a dynamic organism and its structures and functions as evolving, steadily growing change and transformation. Approaches to historical research. Broadly speaking, there are two kinds of approaches to historical research. While the first one is ancient, the later one is contemporary. They are as follows. Perspective approach. It means to study the events from the past towards present. It is an ancient approach and helpful to study the political personality as well. Retrospective approach. It means to study the events of the present and proceed to past events. It is a new approach to study the phenomena in socio-cultural milieu. Good and Hat have given two aspects of historical research. The first one being synthetic and constructive process. It is a combination of different views in a constructive way, and the method. Historical criticism involves desk work. Such approach is a process of analysis and synthesis of records and documentation. Mechanical problem of documentation. This approach depends upon the mechanical problem of data collection. The documents will be interpreted objectively on a philosophical or logical basis. Due importance will be given to the elimination of subjectivity by philosophical interpretation. Sources of data for historical method. Obtaining the best data available to solve a problem is an initial and important task of a historical researcher. The sources of data for historical research consists primary data and secondary data. Primary data, oral testimony by elders. These are spoken account of witness or participant in an event. Eyewitness accounts can be narrated by an actual observer or participant in an event, and it would be obtained in personal interview. All this is to be recorded or transcribed as the witness relates his or her experiences. Records and other documentary materials. Such materials are maintained and written by actual participant or witness of an event. These sources are produced for the purpose of transmitting of information to be used in future. Documents classified in this category as primary sources are constitutions, charters, laws, diaries, deeds, genealogies, contracts, autobiographies, letters, official minutes or records, permits, declarations, certificates, lists, bills, receipts, newspapers and magazines, accounts, maps, books, pamphlets, films, pictures, recording, transcriptions and research reports. Relics. These are associated with a person, group or period, fossils, skeletons, weapons, food utensils, clothing, buildings, furniture, pictures, paintings, coins, and art objects are some of the important examples of relics. The content of ancient burial place would be a great deal of information in understanding the way of life of group or people. The data available from the above mentioned sources may be scattered and discontinuous and fragmented. Personal accounts are mostly subjective and so should be studied with great caution and corroborated with documentary evidences. Their authenticity should be tested. Only authentic sources should be depended upon for collection of data. It is essential to check and cross-check the data from as many sources as possible. Secondary data. Secondary sources are the reports of a person who relates the testimony of actual witness or participant in an event. The writer of the secondary source, who was not on the scene of the event, merely reports what the person who was there said or wrote. Such secondary sources of data are usually of limited worth for research purposes due to the error that may result when information is passed on from one person to another. Most history books and encyclopedia are examples of secondary source. Some types of material may be secondary sources for some purposes and primary sources for other. Steps in historical research. The feasibility of the study should be examined. The researcher should see whether the selected problem lends itself to historical analysis. It should be one of tracing and describing the past or of relating to the recent past to draw out its significance for the present and the future. It should also be feasible in terms of its research ability, time and cost. The selected problem should be formulated and the plan of the study should be designed. The sources of data should be located. The genuineness of the sources and the validity of the facts contained in them should be tested. Relevant facts should be collected from authentic sources and they should be checked and cross-checked. The facts should be arranged into a logical sequence, and this synthesis of facts is a basis for rebuilding of the past situation. Last, by adopting induction process, meaningful interpretations and generalizations should be made. In general, the major steps in historical research includes identification and definition of the problem, collection of data, criticism of data, and finally interpretation of data to arrive at general conclusions. However, the quality of the historical research depends on the relevance, adequacy, and the completeness of facts collected, their reliability, and the ingenuity of the researcher in classifying and integrating them and in drawing inferences. Functions of historical research: collection of data with the consideration of documents and remains of relics of primary and secondary sources of bibliographical procedure and or organization of materials. Criticism of data collected, including the processes of external criticism and internal criticism. The presentation of the facts in readable form involving problems of organization, composition, exposition, and interpretation. The writing of the report calls for creativity in addition to the qualities of imagination and resourcefulness. A research report should be written in a style that is dignified and objective. The historian is permitted a little more freedom in reporting. It is suggested that the historian is not condemned to a bald, plain, unattractive style, and that for the sake of relieving the monotony of statement and after statement of bare facts, it is permissible now and then to indulge in a bit of color, however, by warning that above all, embellishment must never become a first aim or be allowed to hide or distort and truth. Therefore, Mowley suggests that while the writing the historical report must unavoidably and undesirably allow for a somewhat great degree of freedom in the use of subjectivity than does the usual research report, this not a license for the historian to let his imagination and his personal bias to distort the facts. Historical criticism. According to M. Verma, within the classified data, which is like ore from mines, a lot of cross-referencing and collection is necessary to cancel out error and spurious elements. This is logically so simple process as to be close to more common sense, but requires a good memory for detail. If one has been generous in gathering data, some elements may have been caught in the net of which at the end do not appear germane and may at this stage be rejected. The rest may be subjected to what is known as external and internal criticism. This evaluation or criticism involves a dual process of establishing authenticity and the source and also the validity of its content. External criticism. It considers the source material itself and decides its genuineness. Spurious material, forgeries, and other misleads are here uncovered. This requires a lot of erudition and a wax tablet memory in the researcher. The prime purpose of such criticism is to establish the authenticity of the source of the data, whether it is reliable or not. Various tests may be used to ascertain the authenticity and genuineness of data. For example, the problem of establishing age or authorship of document may involve many tests such as handwriting, signature, type, spelling, language, usage, knowledge available at that time, and the consistency with what is known. It may involve physical and chemical tests of ink, paper, stone, wood, metal, etc. Internal criticism. It is an evaluation of the content or the information contained in the source. Its purpose is to ascertain the truthfulness of credibility of the data. After testing the authenticity of a historical data, it is essential to judge its accuracy and worth. It may be genuine, but may not reveal whether the writer or creator was competent enough or they actually knew the fact. The historian must be sure that the data are authentic and accurate. The accuracy and the precision of data is examined by internal criticism. Hence, according to Kerlinger, a document may survive external criticism and still be a subject as evidence. There may be no doubt of the true author or recorder of events, and he may be competent. Willingly or unwillingly, however, he may have distorted the truth. Internal criticism, in brief, seeks true meaning and value of the content of sources of data. The criticism of data, both internal and external, establishes the reliability and validity of data, or the authenticity and validity of the content, that is accuracy. Evaluation of historical research. It is important to keep some criteria in mind while evaluating the report of the historical research. The following are some of the criteria and would be helpful in evaluation of historical research. Has the problem been defined clearly? Is the problem capable of solution? Is it within the competence of the researcher? Are the data of a primary nature available in sufficient to provide a solution? Has there been over-dependence on secondary or unverifiable source? Has the dependency of the data been adequately established? Has the relevance of the data been adequately explored? Does the researcher display adequate mastery of the data and insight into their relative significance? Does it display adequate historical perspective? Does the researcher maintain the objectivity through the entire research? Does the researcher see the relationship between the data and other historical facts? Does the style of writing attract as well as inform? Does the report make a contribution on the basis of newly discovered data or new interpretation? Does it reflect scholarliness? Limitations and difficulties in historical research. As the historical research is concerned with the past, reliable and adequate data may not be available. The remoter is the past, the greater is the difficulty in obtaining relevant facts. It is also difficult to test the genuineness and authenticity of sources and the data available from them. Personal biases and private interpretations often enter unconsciously. It is difficult to establish the time order of events. The records available are not kept in the order and with the precision that a researcher expects. Hence, the researcher's inferences may not be full or accurate. The dispersal of documents is another limitation. The researcher may not succeed in locating all documents. It is difficult to perceive the real significance of the data because of their remote time period. In historical research, precise measurements, verification, and replication are not possible. It is very difficult to study historical events on the basis of cause-effect relationship. Many obstacles can hinder the objectivity of the study. The researcher must have a special historical perspective. Ultimately, the importance of historical research has declined due to use of scientific method in social sciences. Nevertheless, a thorough and systematic historical study is of immense use in understanding the past and drawing inferences for the present and future. The following would throw more light on the place and importance of the historical research in social sciences. As we discussed earlier, the method of historical study in social sciences has had great impetus from Darwin's studies of biological evolution. Another instance of social study being done on exclusively historical basis is Oppenheimer's The State, in which he has been shown how the institution of state has developed in the course of human history. Many famous and influential social scientists have popularized the historical method by using in their studies of social, political, and cultural development, and among them Karl Marx, Max Weber, Wright C. Mills, Raymond Aron, to mention only a few of the stalwarts of historical method. The social scientists who have employed this method seem clearly to have been influenced by Hegel's philosophy of history and Darwin's theory of biological evolution. The historical method primarily concerned with the origin and development of social institutions and cultural forms, and the progress of their evolution is charted. The historical method studies a particular institution in the background of entire human history. Auguste Comte, Herbert Spencer, and Hobhouse studied the main social institutions in the light of and in connection with other institutions. The entire human history formed a background in their studies. Some sociologists have vehemently opposed the extension of Herbert Spencer's methods. According to them, the various treatises claiming to trace the origin and development of various social institutions were, in fact, no more than bland historical descriptions. As the theory of evolution was fashionable in the 18th and 19th centuries, every social scientist wished to base his studies on evolutionary basis and follow the pattern of simple to complex form, as in the case with Darwin's theory of evolution. But this extension of biological methodology to social sciences is considered illegitimate by many modern social scientists. To follow the biological method of simple forms to complex forms blindly in social sciences, tantamount to fill in material indices already cast. This makes the study superficial and artificial. Still, we cannot condemn the contribution of evolutionary method in social sciences. Max Weber is a modern sociologist to make extensive use of historical method. Though critical of many Marxian principles, Weber follows the historical method in his study. He has appreciated Marx's emphasis on economic factor in history. As a matter of fact, modern social scientists are not in favor of wholesale application of historical method and the study of institutions in the background of entire human history. They are, however, not opposed to the study of particular institutions in their evolutionary aspect. Max Weber has studied capitalism, modern government, and religions in the light of economic determinism. That is, he tried to see the role of economic factors on these. For these studies of popular institutions, it is essential to study them in connection with other institutions. The historical method has proved useful in the study of particular human institutions. Guidelines for historical research. To overcome the limitations or difficulties as discussed above, while intending a historical research, the following would be fruitful to the researcher. The researcher can use primary sources extensively as far as possible. Personal biases have to be eliminated or should not be allowed to influence the research procedure. Proper recognition has to be given to the interrelationship between sources, for example, the interrelationship between family and other social institutions and forces in socialization. Phrases, words, and expressions have to be used and interpreted in the light of their usages as in earlier times. Various facts and data have to be synthesized, integrated, and interpreted to arrive at meaningful generalizations. Significant facts or data have to be distinguished from trivial facts in situation. From the foregoing discussion, it is clear that historical research is a process of learning through the records of past events to understand the present and to predict the future. By using historical research as a method of inquiry, the researcher can integrate the relationship between persons, events, times, and places with a list of characteristics and of chronological events. It is primarily concerned with the origin and development of the subject matters included for the study and the progress of their evolution. It studies a particular institution, culture, folkways, etc. in the background of entire human history. It is mainly focused on drawing of explanations and to arrive at general conclusions through the interpretation of the past.